6:47. Let's just update you on the breaking news that attack that Israel launched on Iran, and there has been some retaliatory response. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, said the government has urged all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. That's not going to happen, frankly, is it, at the moment? Should we talk to Middle East analyst Dan Feferman, who's in Israel? Morning to you, Dan. What can you tell us about what we're seeing in terms of retaliation from Iran?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I'm actually not in Israel because my flight was turned back mid-air as it was about to land, and I've been relocated to somewhere in Europe until the Israeli skies open up again. What we know so far, and as expected, is that the Iranian regime, of course, has promised massive amounts of retaliation. As we speak, some 100 UAVs, some 100 Iranian drones are in the air en route to Israel. In all likelihood, the Israeli Air Force, and I can imagine with other various U.S. allies, will intercept those long before they ever reach Israeli skies, so over the airspace of Iraq or of Jordan. What we can also expect is to probably see attempts at terrorist attacks at either Israel or even Jewish communities or related sites and embassies and synagogues around the world. And that is something, of course, that we're going to have to be much more careful of over the coming days and weeks and possibly even longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, just bring us up to speed on what we've seen overnight with the Israeli strikes on Iran. And we understand they actually killed the chief of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards.
That is correct. So we're still piecing all the puzzle together from the various news reports and kind of open source intel pieces. And I was trying to do this actually from the airplane as we were still in midair. But we know Israel launched very sophisticated pinpoint intelligence-driven strikes on Iranian nuclear installations and on residential areas that very specifically targeted senior officials, including the head of the IRGC, but also very senior nuclear scientists assassinated, involved in the weaponization and in the very inner circles of the nuclear program. So this is clearly a strike meant to target Iran's nuclear program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the government released an announcement that Iran had come dangerously close to a point of no return as far as the weaponization and of reaching the mass amounts of enriched uranium, and this was a point of no return. And I'll just add lastly, Iran's really biggest threat of so-called mutually assured deterrence against Israel, Hezbollah, was all but taken out months back in the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. And so the really strong deterrent of Iran was neutralized months ago by Israel.
Yes,
and
but Dan, why take this action now when there were talks underway, although they seem to be faltering somewhat? It seems pretty clear that Netanyahu has done this without the blessing of the White House.
I wouldn't be so sure. In fact, I would think this could not be done without not just the blessing, but the actual coordination of the White House, and probably in a much quieter way of regional partners. I think the 60-day period that President Trump and the White House gave to the Iranians to come to the table and accept the nuclear package was not just ignored, but Iran seemed to be hardening its positions. Apparently, intel is now being released to the public, but there was strong intelligence that Iran was advancing rapidly and aggressively in key elements of its nuclear program in recent months. And it was deemed by Israeli leaders and intelligence that it was nearing a point of no return, and this was a clear operational window as far as the military side of it, but also as far as a point of no return in the nuclear program.
Dan, what do we think could happen next?
Well, I can imagine that Iran will certainly attempt to strike back in any way that it can. There are always chances that it will operate its proxies. Iran proved itself in the last two direct encounters with Israel over the last year that militarily speaking, it is quite the paper tiger. And especially since Israel in the last strike after Iran had launched over 100 ballistic missiles, Israel reportedly took out most, if not all, of its advanced air defenses. So Iran will strike back. It's hard for me to see them doing it directly and now. It's going to try to activate its various proxies, but even those have been severely weakened since the October 7th attack and the war that ensued because of that. And so Iran will find ways, as I mentioned earlier, it will likely utilize its proxies wherever it can. It could lash out at American related sites around the world. It will certainly try to lash out at Jewish communities around the world who have absolutely nothing to do with Israel, of course. And it might also strike at possibly the Gulf Arab countries, or certainly threaten to do so. But it's going to do so in a way that allows it deniability, as we have known Iran to do over the years.
We're down to about 40 seconds down, but what do you make of what the Prime Minister here has said, calling for tensions to be reduced urgently? I mean, it's a little bit like he's shouting into the wind, I would imagine.
I take it maybe with a bit of a smile and a grain of salt, I have to say, in that usually we get it the other way around, that Israel is attacked and everyone calls for tensions to be reduced. Israel preemptively struck here. I think it would be best for everyone if the tensions were reduced. This nuclear program would have done nobody in the region or internationally any good. I know it spikes tensions in the near term, but this will be good for regional and international stability to neutralize Iran's nuclear program. Iran has been nothing but a threat to international and regional stability since the Islamic Republic came into being in 1979, and taking away its nuclear weapons capacity is an overall good for the international system.
Well, clearly this is the news that we were all dreading waking up to. In recent days, tensions had been building because you had the US saying that the talks over Iran's nuclear program were effectively going nowhere, that the Iranians were not really negotiating properly here. And then the independent Atomic Energy Agency, of course, who were monitoring that nuclear program, said that Iran had been obfuscating. That cleared the way, it seemed, for Israeli airstrikes, and that's what we've seen, these dramatic images that took place overnight. Now we're waiting for the detailed breakdown of what has actually been targeted by the Iranians, but at first glance it seems to have been an attack that's certainly gone after senior figures in the Iranian military. Hossein Salami, who is or was the head of the Revolutionary Islamic Guard Corps, the main fighting force within Iran, a very powerful body, has apparently been killed in these strikes. We are told that nuclear scientists were also potentially targeted here. The Iranians, of course, have said that many civilians have been killed in these strikes. It's clear looking at the images there, it does look as though apartment blocks and the like may have been targeted, but if they were going after nuclear scientists, then perhaps they went after them at their home address. It's always going to be difficult, I think, for the Israelis to strike at the nuclear facilities, because I think two of the three main nuclear facilities are buried deep underground. And that would require the US, with their bunker-busting bombs, really to assist Israel to deeply penetrate those bunkers. So we, as I say, we await to get a proper assessment of what has been struck here. However, in retaliation, immediately for this, we have the launch of 100 drones towards Israel. Now, to my mind, at least for the time being, that looks like a fairly limited response from Iran. You'll remember that last year, right at the height of everything that was taking place in terms of the war in southern Lebanon and what was raging in Gaza, Israel had gone after these proxies, these terrorist groups that are aligned to Iran. Hezbollah being one in southern Lebanon and elsewhere throughout the region, and there was this audacious attack involving targeting the walkie-talkies and other communications devices that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard members and other agents had, that had a very significant death toll and injured many, many others. Then there was a retaliation that involved ballistic missiles as well as hundreds of drones. So at the moment, the response from Iran looks limited, but nonetheless, these drones heading towards Israel.
OK, thank you, Mark White. Well, we're now joined by Defence Editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Good to see you this morning, Robert Fox. We've just been hearing there from Mark these 100 drones launched from Iran towards Israel. They're obviously working to intercept those as we speak. What happens next?
It's going to go on, I'm afraid, Ellie. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu's government has said, that this is going to take a matter of days, because it is exactly as Mark White was saying, that they're trying to get a lot of the sites. There are two or three, two buried. And there's also a site where they're using new centrifuges to work up weapons-grade uranium. And there was a fear that by autumn, say September, Iran was going to have 15 usable either nuclear warheads on missiles or bombs, and might actually use them. They've been very threatening, again, as Mark was saying, and the talks with Steve Witkoff, the Trump's special envoy in the Middle East, due to go into the sixth round in Oman on Monday, were quite clearly getting nowhere. So far as we can tell, US forces have not been involved, and in fact the White House has said directly they've not been involved. But the big clue that something big was up is the disposition of US forces and indeed UK and French forces, and there may even be something coming up from Germany, because Chancellor Scholz yesterday was very vehement about Iran attempting to acquire a usable nuclear arsenal, and they must be stopped, he said.
But is there a sense of this? Because Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, was very keen to point out that this was unilateral action. Is there a sense America's been dragged into this when perhaps they didn't want to be? They wanted a bit more of a pause before any action was taken?
Well, what Witkoff, Rubio and Trump really wanted to show was that they could negotiate their way through this. I think they were pretty realistic, all three of them, that it was getting nowhere. And it's the art of the deal. Trump doesn't like wars, as we know, but felt really that this was going to happen. Netanyahu could not have operated without the say-so of the US. And as this goes on, and they've said from Tel Aviv military headquarters and from Jerusalem, we are hearing that they expect at least this first phase to go on for several days. They're going to look for ammunition resupply, fuel even, spare parts for aircraft that might have been involved in the attack from the US. So they are going to be involved. And the other thing that everybody is waiting for is for retaliation. The US yesterday ominously gave an order for embassies right across North Africa, for example, to be prepared to go to bunkers to take shelters because they feared retaliation was coming.
The impact, Robert, on the rest of us, what sort of global repercussions will this have? Because even this morning we're hearing from South Korea saying that this conflict, if it escalates, will have a considerable impact on oil and liquid natural gas, of course, which puts us back to where we were a couple of years ago at the start of the Ukraine situation. Absolutely.
Oil has already, Brent crude has gone to $78 a barrel. And in the short term, there is one country, one oil producer this favors almost more than any other, and that's Russia, because they can sell their oil. They've been selling it, as we know, to China and to India principally, as well as to others with the ghost ships. And it means that much needed money will come into the Kremlin's coffers. What I think is worrying about this is what is the end state? What is the aim that Israel with the US really want to achieve? And as we heard from Mark White, that they have targeted some very, very key leaders, both in the civilian staff developing the nuclear industry, as Tehran, the Ayatollahs would have you to believe, but in fact now believed to be absolutely key architects of the military nuclear program, as well as the commander of the Revolutionary Guard Corps and the commanders of conventional forces. 2 or 3 have been taken out. So Mossad is very, very active inside Iran, and we believe their operation, covert operation, is continuing. And it's not just Mossad; it is the very, very sophisticated electronic, cyber, but signals surveillance done by one of the biggest military units in the whole of the Israeli Defense Force, the so-called military unit 8200, which, by the way, the British have been trying to copy in a very, very short order with the new cyber force and cyber command announced in the Strategic Defense Review. And if I can continue just with that, if this goes on, it throws a lot of the assumptions that we just heard in last week's Strategic Defense Review and a lot of the plans for the reform of NATO due in the big summit at the end of this month, throws it all up in the air.